Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, please rise for the presentation of colors. At this time, I would ask you to remain standing as we welcome our honored guests for the evening. I would ask you to remain standing as Mr. Paul Gabrielson leads us in the singing of the national anthem and the Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I would like to introduce Central Alternative High School's Student Government President, Mr. John Cruiser. You may be seated.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is John Cruiser. I am President of Central Student Government. On behalf of the student body, I welcome you here tonight. The World War II has faced many challenges and they have succeeded in reaching their goals. Central is known for doing things differently, and this way of learning will be remembered for years to come. Once again, I thank you for being here tonight, and I hope you enjoy our program. Now, I am proud to introduce to you a principal who has seen a lot since becoming head dragon, Ms. Kim Clayton.
I'm glad you could all make it to class tonight. I don't know much about military protocol, but at Central Alternative High School we have a few protocols of our own. One of them is that every day, every student at Central says good morning to me. So, good evening, class. We'll try that again. Good evening, class. John says that I have seen a lot of things since I've become the head dragon. One of the most interesting things I've seen is the power of expanding learning outside of the classroom walls. Across generations, into homes and nursing homes and Legion halls. Classrooms are everywhere, not just inside school buildings. And teachers and learners come in all ages and from many different viewpoints. Most importantly, I've seen a group of students who learn things the hard way, by writing books, by locating and listening to primary resources, and by inviting about 1,000 of you into our classroom tonight. I hope you enjoyed tonight's class, and I hope you learn your lessons. Thank you.
At this time, I would like to introduce from the Confederate Air Force, Mr. Scott Rommel.
Hello, my name is Scott Rummel with the Confederate Air Force, Southern Minnesota Wing, and I was asked down here by John Adelman from Central High School to make an update on the Red Tail project, which is basically a P-51C Mustang that's being restored back into Tuskegee Airmen colors. And we have made significant advancements. I don't know if everybody's aware that John had done a previous presentation with the Tuskegee Airmen, a research project that raised well over $5,000 for our project, a restoration project. The state of Minnesota matched that grant, so that brought over $10,000 of needed money to bring the project back to its original state, which there is no C-model Mustangs flying today in the world. And I think, not to get into a bunch of technical terms, but we're making a lot of big parts out of little parts with the aircraft. The main fuselage has been disassembled and it's being restored back with new skins. The engine mount is, in the present time, being refitted to the fuselage. The tail section is restored and ready to get painted and reattached to the main fuselage. The wing has most of its hydraulics installed into it. We're starting on the fuel systems, and it's all coming together by December 2000. That's a later date than we anticipated, but we also ran into more problems than we had previously thought we had. And one of the things, the major things that we're working on is fundraising. We hired a firm, HBH Fundraising, out of Minneapolis, and they said basically we couldn't raise enough money to put the aircraft back in the air based on the information we had. So we started working on an educational forum, and John Adelman has been nominated or recommended as one of the advisory board is established for fundraising, and also, or not for fundraising, but for putting an educational curriculum together to talk about the history of World War II and specifically the Tuskegee Airmen, which he'll be an intimate part of. And I want to thank you very much for everyone in Dubuque's efforts for supporting John, and especially John's efforts, and all the students too.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Central Alternative High School teacher John Adelman.
Good evening and welcome to our seminar. People can express themselves with tears of sadness or tears of joy, but tonight there are also tears of awe. I know because I got them. As I look out over the audience tonight, I can say with confidence that anyone who asks what we're going to do next year to top this will probably get a punch in the nose. Given the unique nature of this project, I would like to briefly discuss the issue of academic standards as it relates to the work you see here tonight. The Dubuque Community School District has developed an extensive series of standards and benchmarks that drive what is taught in grades K through 12. In essence, these academic standards explain what all Dubuque school students should know and should be able to do by the time they graduate from high school. The academic benchmarks measure what each student at each grade level must master to ultimately meet the standard. Every academic discipline has them. In developing the social studies component of this class project, we referred to the standards. Social studies academic standard number 2 reads as follows. The student will develop an historical perspective and habits of thinking in the examination and sharing of ideas related to the human experience. The benchmark for late high school states, the student will describe and analyze a significant period or pattern of change within a civilization. I think you'll agree with me that with their research book and seminar, the students in this class have met that standard. Because we cannot have an invocation or a benediction tonight, let us consider this true story from our nation's history. On June 28, 1787, the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia was embroiled in bitter debate. Tempers were running high, so high that several delegates actually left the meeting. At 81 years of age, Dr. Benjamin Franklin commanded respect from all present. In this moment of crisis, he slowly rose to address the presiding officer, George Washington, and the rest of the delegates. Reminding the assembly of its once honored practice of a moment of prayer before beginning its deliberations, Franklin said in part, "Mr. President, I have lived, sir, a long time. And the longer I live, the more convincing proofs I see of this truth, that God governs in the affairs of men." Some 213 years later, Franklin's words remain true, and I want to publicly acknowledge God's hand in this project. For those who doubt a providential involvement in the planning and execution of all that you see here tonight, please see Tim or myself after the program. In closing, I'd like to read briefly from the preface to the student research book, A Tribute to Victory. During the desperate days of World War II, many sacrifices were made to preserve freedom and liberty for succeeding generations of Americans. Today, the students and staff of Central Alternative High School are those generations. We are the direct beneficiaries of that sacrifice. Accordingly, this research project is proudly dedicated to the citizens of Dubuque and our honored guests who served their country during World War II. As the embodiment of the future for who you veterans once fought, tonight we humbly pay this tribute to your victory. Thank you.
This program bring you a special news bulletin. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii by air. President Roosevelt has just announced. The attack also was made on a military activity on the principal island of Oahu.
Any American who was around on December 7th, 1941, surely recalls all too well the announcement we just heard. When the United States received word that Japan had attacked Pearl Harbor, American citizens were outraged, surprised, and frightened. Proud young Americans all over the country sprang into action to protect the nation that they loved, and the Dubuque area was no exception. Men like Pat Sweeney, Merle Mathis, Earl Genthy, Don Palmer, and Bob Zentner were sent to fight in Europe and Africa, while folks like Clarence Gilligan, Vern Maurer, Bob Wagner, and Paul Simon headed to the Pacific to secure victory over the Axis powers. The war, however, could not have been won without the support on the home front from people like Hugh Lambert, Becky Jones, Francis Holland, and Dale Walburn. The manner in which all Americans united for a common goal was nothing short of extraordinary. Japan and Nazi Germany soon learned what happens when America's freedoms are threatened. Tonight you will hear three stories of very different war experiences from three very different World War II veterans, all of whom were united by one common goal, the preservation of freedom. Here to introduce our first guest is Central High School student Miss Lisa Becker.
Our first guest was born in Faribault, Minnesota in November 1919. This outgoing lady had decided to soar the skies at a very young age. Wanting to join an all-male sky club, our guest attempted to get a loan at the bank. The banker told her that women don't fly. This future wasp quickly responded, "This one's going to," and that's what she did. She joined the Civil Air Patrol by the age of 21. Making herself the only female out of 30 male cadets. After seeing a notice for the WASP organization, she applied. Knowing that she had met the requirements of 35 hours flying time, her sister and she went to Avenger Field in Sweetwater, Texas, an all-women's training base. Becoming a WASP in August of 1943, she received her silver wings and was transferred to a gunnery school in Las Vegas. 3 months later, there, she started doing what she loved best, flying fighters. Eventually, she went back to Avenger Field for more training. as an instrument instructor, then returned to the gunnery school. As a WASP, she flew cargo, top-secret weapons, trained male pilots, and transported military personnel throughout the United States. She also tested planes to make sure they were safe for use by instructors and their students. The WASP were pushed out the door in December of 1944 with no benefits or recognition for what they did. With World War II ending in 1945, women pilots were not accepted until 1979. Each WASP was awarded a Victory Medal in 1984, and those who served a year or more of duty received the American Theater Medal. In August of 1992, she flew in an F-16 Fighting Falcon, a modern jet fighter. The media was there to record this event. Knowing that our guest was 71 years old at the time, she was a woman. It was such an indescribable experience, I thought I had died and gone to heaven, replied this WASP, with the question, "How did you like your flight?" and answering with a big grin, "It was terrible. The plane and I did not want to land. We just wanted to go and go. It was wonderful." Today, she continues to fly and be involved in aviation, also being an active member of 8 different organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to introduce to you an original member of the U.S. Women's Air Force Service Pilots, Elizabeth Strophus.
Okay. Good evening. I can't tell you how happy I am to be here this evening. I am so proud of what those children from Central School did, and their teachers, and the principal, and the whole group. Didn't they do a wonderful job? When John asked me to come, he didn't have to ask me twice. I was real happy to come. It's my first time in Dubuque, and I've really been having a grand time. A beautiful city, and I love your hospitality. Now, when I started flying, as Lisa said, I guess women weren't supposed to fly, but you know, they really didn't tell me that when I started. I had started in Faribault in 1942. Maybe I could get someone with my slide. Okay. I'm going to put my slides on. I'm going to show them.
Whenever there's a technical problem, they call on me. Who has absolutely no knowledge of any technological advancement since the use of indoor plumbing. I think this is what we're looking for. Good luck.
Thank you. Excuse me. Well, you see, it's good that I have a few slides because then I can keep my mind on in line. Thanks, Tim. You did good. This is a 65 horsepower Cub that I started flying, and I thought that was great, but let me tell you, I found a steerman, and when I found that, I thought that was really great. I just loved to do the acrobatics of that steerman. And then when I went down to Texas, well, we got picked up at the airport, airport, forget it. We were picked up at the train, and this was our vehicle that took us all over when we had any kind of either going to the auxiliary field or whatever. This was our official vehicle. It was a cattle truck, and believe me, you knew it was one, but then they cleaned it out pretty good, and they put 2 big long boards in, and they herded us in, and we sat down on the side. And you know, I never knew what they thought we were going to do because they locked the door, and they didn't open it again until we got to point B. None of us wanted to leave. And this was the PT-19, little low-wing Fairchild. That was a fun aircraft. Open cockpit, that's why we had to wear uniforms because, you know, the higher you get, the colder it got. A little chilly up there. But it was a wonderful, wonderful plane to fly. I sure liked that. Then we went on to the BT-13. I know a lot of you people here tonight have been through aviation training. You see, the fellows, when they would go into training, the cadets would go to one school for a primary training. They'd go to another school. I think this is going to take off. They go to one school for a primary training, and then they go to another school for basic, and then they go to a third school for advanced flying. But because they were sure that we were not going to be able to fly these airplanes, they had all of our training in one field. Now, that was a real accomplishment, I tell you. Anyway, after the BT-13, then I flew an AT-6, and oh, I tell you, I had a love affair with that aircraft. Between basic and advanced flying, my farmer friend from Minnesota came down to Texas, and he said, now you saw that you could fly an airplane. Now you come on home, and we'll raise a family. Of course, get married first, you see. And he said, and he did have an airplane, and well, for 2 days he talked, and I thought, well, maybe that'd be all right. After all, he did have an airplane. So I went in and saw the establishment officer, and I said, I'm going to resign. And she said, resign, Betty, you've been doing so well. She looked up my record, and she said, well, you've been doing good in flying. And I passed the ground school. You see, in taking ground school, I never went to college, so I never took all the information you're supposed to have to go into pilot training. In fact, I never even waited around to get a private license. I went from a student license to a commercial. Don't tell FAA that. I'm in trouble already. Anyway, when he said, well, he was going to leave, and I finally said, well, I guess maybe I would. So he said, well, he'd wait in Kansas City for me. And Miss Deaton, who I was speaking to a while back, she said, well, if you want to resign, of course, that's up to you. But before you resign, I want you to take a flight in the AT-6. Well, you know what happened? I got a flight in that AT-6, and I told that boy, I'm not coming home. He said, if you're not coming home, I'm going to go home and marry someone else. And you know what he did? We both lived happily ever after. This is was my favorite aircraft. And you see, if I had known I was going to be giving talks this later in life, for the time that I was in the service, I'd taken some better pictures, believe me. And there we are. There again, we had uniforms from the men because, as they say, they were not sure we were going to be able to hand the planes. And I can understand that because we hadn't done it before. So we wore their zoot suits. And if you got to the place in time, you got suits looking like that. Otherwise, forget it. And these are the winter suits we used. We had to put suspenders on to hold the pants up. They're a little big for us. We put a lot of socks on to hold the shoes on, but you know, we didn't care what we had to wear. We wanted to fly airplanes. And that was our emblem. It was called a Fifanella. Walt Disney designed this for us, and she kind of was a good luck charm. We still have her around. And those are our silver wings. Those wings will be the only wings of that shape that you'll see. It'll be from World War II. That signified womanhood. The men had the shield, and that signified manhood. Now the wings are both the same. And there I am in my uniform. Boy, if you didn't think I was a hot pilot, all you had to do was ask me. There, I like that because we had to wear turbans in the service, and when I got out, I could wear my hair. So I had to have a picture with the leather jacket, the white, the white scarf, and the whole bit. And there, we were not supposed to wear we were not supposed to wear slacks at any time except we were flying. And this was supposed to be a picture of the first women who came to Las Vegas Army Airfield to train gunners. But I just got out of an airplane, so they let me in the picture. One time I was flying. You see, I was only supposed to fly 4 hours a day because the missions that we were flying, we would dive in. Not only the women, but the men were only supposed to fly the 4 hours a day because of the type of missions we did. We were either up there in AT-6 or a P-39 diving in a formation of 3 B-17s. Excuse me. They chewed at us with camera guns, but whenever I was flying, diving in under that. Excuse me.
Technology.
Excuse me. Thanks, Waterboy. And so,
College graduate.
thank you very much. Meanwhile, then I was at the field, so I'd fly my 4 hours, and Las Vegas, the fellas come home, they'd come back to the field, they didn't look too good. Some of them were a little green, and I'd say, well, if you don't feel good, go sign your Form 1, and I'll take your mission for you. I'd been checked out in all the planes, so it didn't matter. I was a co-pilot in the B-17, co-pilot in the B-26. I flew the P-39, the AT-6, so anything they wanted to fly, I was available. Well, this one day they needed someone to take a mission over at Indian Springs, which is just north and a little west of Las Vegas. And so they said, well, will you do that? Well, I sure will. So I jumped in my AT-6, and he said, now, there's no difference between this mission and the mission you've been doing. Of course, the other mission, I've been doing it in the air, you see. I had to get about 2,500 feet above the B-17 and dive in at them. Well, this time they were on the field, and I had to go in the office and sign a statement. I thought it said 50 feet, but it said 500. Anyway, I come over to the building where I was supposed to, the fellows were on the other end of the building, and I came in from the south. It was all solid building. And I did miss the roof, but just as I got over the roof, I changed the prop pitch of an AT-6. And oh, is that a pretty sound? That's a real pretty sound. I turned around and every one of the fellas had hit the deck. Well, then I went around in front, and then I did what I was supposed to do, dive in at them, and they were shooting at me. And thank God they had camera guns that day, because I'd have been shot down. Anyway, after doing my mission, I landed because I was running low on fuel. And some young man came along the ramp, and oh my, was he mad. I mean, they could tell he was mad. His face was big and red. And before I get out of an airplane, I reach in my little pocket, and I have a comb and I have a lipstick. I'm a pilot, but I'm a woman pilot. So I get my hat off and brush my hair up and get my lipstick on. And he came down and he kept looking in the cockpit. I'm standing on the wing. He kept looking in the cockpit to see who else was there. And he said, where's that pilot that flew that last mission? Oh, I said, I'm your pilot. And I don't think he said what he was going to say when he saw it was me. Anyway, he said, I'm going to report you. You scared the out of my boys. And I said, tell me, where are your boys going from here? He said, they're going to combat, and I want them to live to get there. Well, I said, maybe this just was a good mission. Did they get good marks today? Well, yeah, they wanted to shoot you down. I said, well, that was a good thing. I mean, after all, I was supposed to be enemy. Anyway, we were friends later on. That's the B-26. That's a plane that we had a great big tow rope behind it, a big sleeve, and that's when they'd shoot at it. That they shot at us with actual ammunition. I'm glad they missed me. And this is the way we taught instrument flying. I just wanted to show you this. They would put them under the hood, and then we'd have to fly them. The fellows weren't too sure they wanted to fly with me, but once I showed them I could handle an aircraft, it was okay. I'm going backwards. That just shows you what we did with the sleeve. And then in December 20th, 1944, they said, thank you, women, you did a wonderful job. And you know what we did? We flew every type of aircraft the military had, 77 different types, up to and including that great big B-29 that Paul Tibbets is going to talk about this evening. I wasn't able to be that, but 3 gals did fly in the B-29, and I'm very, very proud of what they've done. Also, there were 25,000 women that applied for this organization. 1,800 were were invited to the service or to the field, but only 1,074 of us received our silver wings. There's a little over 500 of us left. So we're still going strong. Anyway, we had a wonderful time, and we were really sad not to have continued flying. We told the government we'd do it for nothing, but they wouldn't accept that. And we had 38 of our women killed in the service. This was pretty sad. The private sector, insurance sector, private sector, oh dear. The private industry would not accept us as a risk in taking out insurance because they were sure. I don't know why getting shot at was too dangerous, and the government wouldn't insure us because we were not as yet a part of the organization. When we went into the service, we took the oath of the military. We were under orders at all time. We flew all their airplanes. We did everything we were told to do, but we never were made a part of the service. Until she said back in 1978, we were recognized as veterans. And I'm very proud to be a veteran of the Army Air Forces. Thank you. 38 of our women were killed, and because they had no insurance. If the family couldn't afford to send the body home, why, one of the girls would get together and have that money. There was no flag on the coffin. There was no star in the window. So that was pretty sad. But you know what? I'm sure glad I lived long enough to get recognized. In 1990, a gal came calling on me. She had heard that I was a pilot from World War II. And she said, well, what do you have in regard to when you were in the service? So I got me out of the closet. I had a lot of boxes of my military things in the closet, and we had a lot of things. And they took my pictures and made slides, and I'm on this wonderful sentimental journey. And they went to the Confederate Air Force show, and I love those Confederate Air Force boys. 2 of our boys up here this evening. I am just so proud to be a part of that organization. They keep our old planes going so you folks that are younger can see the kind of planes that we flew during World War II. And they really are be commended, and I'm really proud to be a part of them. Oh yes, then I was going to tell you, I went down, that was in Midland, Texas with my sentimental journey, and I've been having a marvelous time. Can you tell I like to tell my story, huh? It shows. When I got out of the service, I had a 4-engine rating. Of course, I flew pursuits. I taught instrument flying. I even went and got a seaplane rating. Then I went to Northwest Airlines, and I said, I'd like a job with I'd like to fly for your company. And they said, oh, we don't take women pilots. I said, if I don't do as well as or better than any pilot you got aboard, I don't want your job. Well, they said, we would like you in the front office. I told them what they could do with that. So then I did many things, but I went home, got married, had 5 wonderful children, a wonderful life. And then 1994, they asked me to come over to Northwest Airlines to give a presentation, and I was real happy to go. There was a few things I wanted to say to them. But they were very good to me. Terry Marsh met me, and that's he in the picture there. And they let me fly the 747 simulator. I did a slow roll in one. How do you like that? I flew through the IDS tower. Doug and Scott, don't tell on me. I flew through the IDS tower. Of course, we backed up again. And then he landed the craft, and he said, okay, he said, let's see what you can do. How about your landing? You know, I look at all those buttons and all those instruments they have there, and I thought, dear God in heaven. But then I saw the little airplane, and I saw hold that level, and then I asked what speed the craft landed at, and he told me, and I put it in a nice even dive there, and I breezed it in, and he pulled it out again. He said, I don't believe it. I did it 3 times. The gal in the center, her name is Sandy Anderson, and she's one of the gals now that is a captain in Northwest Airlines and is doing what I wanted to do. And it's just wonderful to see the young women that are doing what they want to do. Well, then, at one of the show, there was a beautiful F-16 sitting out there in the field, and Eugene Andreotti, the Adjutant General of the Air National Guard, was standing beside me, and we were talking back and forth. And he said, say, have you ever been in a jet? Been on a jet. You fellas wouldn't even let me near one. You want to fly a jet? Do I want to fly a jet? So he said, you go home, write me a letter. So I went home, wrote him a letter. Didn't hear for 2 weeks. I thought he forgot me. I got a call. They said, well, we got permission for you to fly the F-16. When would you like to fly it? I said, tomorrow. I didn't want to take any chances. He said, well, I have to tell you, he said, not only was I 71 years old, I was also a woman. And women were not flying jet aircraft at that time, or the fighter aircraft. So he said, they asked me if I thought you were capable of handling a flight in an F-16. And he said, I don't know anybody that can handle it better, not a gun if it killed me. Night before I got on that flight, I called my 5 kids and I said, your ma's going in an F-16 tomorrow, and if something happened to me, I went the way I wanted to go. That F-16 there, I'm in the back seat. You can't tell it, but I know it. We took off, 20,000 feet, just like that. Oh, we did so many. He knew acrobatics. I didn't even know. We just had a marvelous time. He had told the crowd down below, because I was such an old woman, he was going to fly straight and level. We got in the air, and he said, what do you want to do? And I said, honey, you said this baby could fly. You show me. And you know what? He showed me. It was a wonderful experience. You can tell how unhappy I am, can't you? That's when I got down from the ladder there. They asked me, how did you like the flight? I said it was terrible. We'd done a few passes over the field. Oh, it was so much fun. You don't go so low and go so fast. And we went around 3 times. And the 3rd time, doggone if that pilot didn't pull the stick and settle it down. I was real disappointed. I said, the plane and I just wanted to keep flying, but he landed it. I just want to show you, this is a picture of Eileen Collins, and Eileen Collins is the first woman commander of a space shuttle, and I was at a program with her down in St. Louis. I'm so proud of what the women are doing today, if they are competent enough to fly the planes and to take the shuttle or whatever. I'm just proud of what's happening with the young ladies today. And also you young men out there, you can do anything you want to do. As long as it isn't immoral or illegal, go for it. God bless you.
At this time, to introduce our next guest, I would like to welcome Mr. John Pecora, Central High School student.
Thank you. Most people know that World War II was fought in 2 theaters, the European and the Pacific. What many people fail to realize is that another war was being fought simultaneously. This war was not fought with guns or bombs. It wasn't fought against a different country or fought on a different soil. This war was waged right here in America. And in the opinion of many, it is the longest and ugliest war in our country's history. This war was more personal. It was caused by Neanderthalic attitudes based on fear and misunderstanding. This is why we still fight the enemy of this war today. That enemy is racism. The man I introduced to you tonight fought both wars that I have described. One pitted him against America's enemy in Europe. The other pitted him against those Americans holding racist attitudes. A native Dubuquer, our guest, lived during a time when segregation was common. As a young man, he couldn't even go into the hotel that he is staying into tonight. While a student at Iowa State College, he received his private pilot license. He then volunteered for the Army Air Corps. Even though he passed the test with high marks, because of his race, the Story County Draft Board drafted him into the Army to fill a quota of blacks. He waited 7 months in Camp Dodge's induction center for his acceptance, which was being considered in Washington, D.C., before being ordered to an experiment that many hoped would fail. He joined other black aviators in Tuskegee, Alabama, in what was called the Tuskegee Experiment. To the astonishment of many, these black pilots did not lose a single bomber to enemy aircraft. After 63 successful missions, he has earned the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Air Medal with Oak Leaf Clusters, and the Purple Heart. It is my pleasure to introduce to you tonight Tuskegee Airman and Native Dubuquer, Robert Martin.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We're here tonight to celebrate the victory of World War II. We also have to celebrate some other victories. The first victory I want to mention is the gentleman who told you about a plane they are rebuilding up in Minnesota. The Confederate Air Force arranged to buy this plane, and by the time they got their hands on it, someone had sawed the wings off. That was sacrilege, to take a beautiful airplane and a chainsaw and saw the wings off. German anti-aircraft couldn't do much more harm. And these people are reconstructing it, and that is a great victory. These high school students are doing the thing their way. They're writing their second book. Their first book was such a success, and it made such an impression on the townspeople and the whole city of Dubuque, that they decided to try it again. And this time, they had no trouble getting financing and getting a professionally published book. And this is their victory that we want to celebrate. My victory is being alive. At the start of World War II, the government did not want black people to fly. I don't know why, but they didn't want us to fly. But anyway, a young man named Yancey William had to sue the United States government to get to allow black people to fly. And the president wanted to win an election, and he thought he could get the black vote, so he went along with the program and established an airfield. I'm getting the high points of it, and set it down there in Alabama in a beautiful place by the town of Tuskegee, from whence my organization, the Tuskegee Airmen, get their name. Now, they were well protected down there. They had the Air Corps headquarters over in Montgomery, Alabama. They had over at Fort Benning, they had big guns and soldiers over there. And to the north of us, we had Martin Lakes. And so we were well protected so we could learn to fly down there. If we wanted to bail out, there was Gulf of Mexico. But we wanted to fly. We finally graduated enough pilots, and they trained as a squadron, 99th Squadron, and they were ready to go to war. But they didn't go to war. They kept training and training and training, because no commander of any of the theaters that we were fighting in, no matter how many men they were losing or anything like that, no one wanted them in their theater. Well, finally, the pressure got so great that they had to send the squadron over to Africa. They were attached to the 33rd Fighter Group over there, flying P-40s. This was the plane that America had any number of at that time, and the commander of the 33rd Fighter Group did not want them, but he accepted them, and they performed their duty very well, but he gave them a bad report, and he wanted them put back in the United States so that white pilots could fly those planes. Well, our commanding officer, General Davis, he was only a colonel at the time, defended their actions before the Senate subcommittee in Washington and the 99th state in operation. The next item was to send over the 332nd Fighter Group. They were 3 squadrons, and they got over there flying P-39s. Well, the P-39 was not quite the greatest airplane in the world, and they were flying harbor patrol. This is a great thing, to fly a dead of a plane and just do harbor patrol where there was no enemy action coming at them. Maybe just because they were up there flying. I don't think the Germans really feared them at that point. But they proved they could fly and could follow orders. That is one of the main things that won this war, people following orders. So the 332nd was transferred over to the 15th Air Force to protect bombers flying long-range missions to hurt the enemy by bombing factories, railroad yards, river traffic, whatever military targets there were. These were the things that could hurt the Germans. They gave the 332nd P-47. With the P-47 plane, they went out and they scored a few victories, and one day they caught a German destroyer in Trieste Harbor, and they sank a German destroyer with machine gun fire from a P-47, which was a very powerful plane that had 8 machine guns, and they managed to hit something very vital on the ship and blew up and sank. No other unit in the Navy, in the Army, and in the Marines, or anything like that, ever duplicated that fact. Well, the next job was P-51s. The P-51 could fly 4.5, 6.5, 7 hours, which was a nice long sit, and they could fly above the bombers, carry them all the way to the target and all the way back. They could intercept German planes coming at them and chase them off, and then come back and protect the bombers again while they were going in, pick them up after they came through the flak of the target defense of the Germans, and then escort them back, and especially escort the wounded bombers, say those with possibly an engine shut out or some damage that was flyable, but they couldn't keep up with the rest of the bomber group, and we got a reputation for protecting these bombers to bring them home. That was General Eaker's idea: bring those bombers home. There's 10 men on a bomber, and we can fix the bomber up and send it back again. But if you run off chasing Germans, fighters just to be an ace, we lose 10 men, maybe you shoot down 1, and that's not the way to win a war. Well, Our next great thing with the P-51 was to fly on a mission that was 800 miles from our base to Berlin, escorting bombers into the target. They were going to bomb the Daimler-Benz tank works, I believe it was. And on that mission, they not only protected the bombers, but they shot down 3 of Germany's brand new Me-262 fighters. Well, I wasn't on that mission. I was on the ground in Yugoslavia. I had been shot down while strafing on a previous mission. But the fact that these men completed that mission, they were awarded the Presidential Unit Citation. The unit continued to the end of the war, and when they came home, there was no victory parade for them. There was no mad cheering for them. They came back, and there was only one place they could go. That was back to Tuskegee, Alabama, to the base there. The base was completely filled with officers, men. They really didn't know what to do with them. Well, they set up another base for them. At the same time, while the war was going on, there was a bomber group that was formed. And this bomber group was sent out to Indiana Godman Field, and they were officers. They'd been commissioned, they had their wings, insignia, and they wanted to go to the officers' club. Well, the commanding officer of the field said, no, you can't go to that officers' club because you're black. Because only the white officer personnel permanently stationed there can go to this officers' club. Well, naturally, they resisted this, and 101 of them were arrested and confined to quarters. Finally, 3 of them were courts-martialed for defiance of this order, but they were perfectly within their rights, and only one man was punished. But each of these men, these 101 men, had a mark on his record. Now, they were following orders because the rules say that every officer on a given base is automatically a member of the officers' club, and they were simply trying to follow the orders of the rules of the Army, the still Army Air Corps then, and enjoy the fruits of being an officer. Well, they had this mark on their records, and there was a move in 1995 to allow them to have this removed from their records. But they had to write in and ask to have this thing removed. Well, only about a third of the men wrote in and asked to have this thing removed from their records. The others said, you put it on there, it shouldn't have been on there in the first place, and so you take it off and it's on their records today. But the war ended before these men could go over to the South Pacific to fight against the Japanese. And so the government decided to play its ace in the hole. the president decided that they could no longer afford two Air Forces, one black Air Force and one white Air Force, and he issued a proclamation which integrated the armed services. That is the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen. Their actions during the war were so commendable that the president would take this great step to integrate the entire armed forces. The day after that, he issued another proclamation which integrated the civil service forces of the United States. And these two actions are almost as great as the 14th, 15th, and 16th Amendment. But it still took many years for these ideas to be accepted by the military and put into force. And this is another victory that we are trying to celebrate. And as the years go by and they get recognition for our part in World War II, one day there will be that victory to celebrate again. Thank you.
To introduce our third and final guest for the evening, Central Alternative High School student Corey May.
Excuse me for a minute. The Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, and as a consequence, we declared war on them. And in the months and years following, a unit was organized and trained to deliver atomic weapons to Japan. The commander of the mission to Hiroshima began his military career in September of 1928 after he decided to give up a career in medicine. And in 1942, this man became the squadron commander of the 340th Bombardment Squadron in England, where he flew 25 missions in B-17s. Upon returning to the U.S., he taught himself to fly the B-29 aircraft. He flew more than 400 hours in the plane, observing its performance so any problems could be corrected. And in September of 1944, he was directed to organize and train a unit to deliver these atomic weapons. He was told, "You are on your own. No one knows what to tell you to do." And at 8:15 and 15 seconds a.m. on August the 6th of 1945, the first atomic bomb exploded, changing war in everyone's lives forever. And soon afterward, the war was ended, and the survivors from all sides got to go home to their families. This man has a great deal of organizational intelligence and dedication to serve his country, and without him, some of us would not have a chance to live today. This man has been decorated with many awards for his military experiences. Among the many awards he received, such as the Distinguished Service Cross, the Air Medal, Purple Heart, and World War II Victory Medal, he most recently has been one of 3 people honored with the Albert Einstein Society Award from the National Atomic Museum Foundation. This man is truly an American hero, and we are very honored to have him with us tonight. So, ladies and gentlemen, Central Alternative High School presents the man who commanded the 20th century's most significant historical event, Brigadier General Paul W. Tibbets, Jr.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. I'm overwhelmed by the ovation. Second item is, I am damn delighted to be here and be a part of this program tonight. These kids are great. Now, the third point I want to make is that this water business refuels my loss of salivary glands. I don't have any anymore. I don't know why I lost them, but they lost. And my mouth gets as dry as this floor when I talk a little bit. So you'll excuse me for sipping water. I'm sure you saw him pour it. You know there's nothing else in it. I had hoped tonight, well, I had hoped before tonight that we would be able to show you a video that was made of the 2 bombardment crews in 1995. I say 2, the 2 atomic bomb crews, those from the Boxcar and those from the Enola Gay. And this was done by a visual arts company up in Connecticut called Greenwich Workshop. They're quite some people, very nice people. They produced this video for the purpose of having a lithograph made and selling those lithographs for a profit. Now, they paid us, they paid our expenses, and they paid us handsomely for coming there and doing all of that and signing 1,000 lithographs. So, you know, none of this was gratis. But we enjoyed it, every minute of it. It gave people a good opportunity to see what the bomb crews were like. So much for that at the moment. What I want to do is just make one more statement and say, I'm going to talk a lot about this bomb group, because it was a unique type of an organization. There's never been one like it before in the United States, and I don't think there will ever be one like it again. It was just too fantastic to be true, but it was a true story. It is a true story. And with that, I'm going to talk about 1944, when I was called in to the office of Second Commanding General, 2nd Air Force in Colorado Springs, right out of the blue. I mean, I got orders to be to his office the next day. I worked in a sub-command under him. But anyway, this man's executive officer called me, said, General Lynn wants you to come on in, bring your B-4 bag with you, because you're not going to go back to Alamogordo. I'd been at Alamogordo but working with some tests for the University of New Mexico to determine the vulnerability of a B-29 airplane to fighter aircraft. With that, I would say that this organization had the greatest amount of secrecy that anything that ever happened. You've read a lot of things today, because it was about 7 years ago that they unclassified everything and said, okay, it's free for all. And the people that love to write stories and impress other people with how much they knew, they read all this stuff and then they started writing books on it. But there were very few people in the time that it happened until we dropped those bombs that knew anything about it, I can assure you that. This general had me come to his office, and one of the things is to emphasize the secrecy and how sure they were in having a secure operation. I got to his office, and the secretary said, I identified myself. She said, yes, General Lynch's been expecting you, but I think he wants you to wait a minute. She punched the squawk box. I mean, today they got different. They talk on the telephone with the secretaries, but anyway, she punched this button on the squawk box and said, Colonel Tibbetts is here. He said, tell him to wait a minute. Okay, fine. I waited probably a minute, maybe less than a minute, and the door to his office opened, and out come an officer wearing the Army uniform of the Corps of Engineers. He was Lieutenant Colonel. He walked over, he stuck out his hand, he said, I'm Jack Lansdale, shall we talk about it? I said, talk about what? He said, I got this dossier here, and he said, it's got all kinds of information on you. That triggered something, because I'd remembered about 4 or 5 months before that, my old man down in Miami, Florida, called me on the phone one day. He said, are you in trouble? I said, not that I know of. Of course, that doesn't mean I hadn't done something I could have gotten in trouble for, but I said, I don't know of anything. Why? He said, well, people, 2 or 3 of them down here in Miami, they're walking around asking questions about you. I said, oh. So he was a close acquaintance of the chief postal inspector down there, and he told this man about it, and the man said, I'll get back to you tomorrow. And we got back, he said, Paul, don't worry about it. He said, they're just inquiring about the boy's background. No problem at all. But anyway, this Jack Lansdale had this big folder, dossier of things under his arm. He said, let's walk over here to the cloakroom. We can have a little quiet there. I'll close the door. We can talk. And I said, okay. Now, you know, strange things happened during the war, so I didn't think anything about it. But I wondered, just quickly, I said, why in the hell is a lieutenant colonel from the Corps of Engineers wanting to talk to me about something? And he laid this thing down on the table, and he asked me 2 or 3 questions. They were just pure, simple questions about Dr. Crum that I had lived with in Cincinnati while I was thinking I was going to go to medical school there. And then he asked a couple other questions about things that happened when I was in grade school down in Miami. And finally, I answered him with his satisfaction. Finally, he said, have you ever been arrested? I said, sure. He said, what for? I said, well, my old man was good to me. As a kid down in Miami, I had an automobile, and I used to sometimes go out and get a little bit heavy-footed, get picked up for speeding or something. I don't mean anything like that. Right then and there, I knew that guy knew something. So I said, sure, I have been. He said, what for? I said, well, I got picked up one night over Surfside, that's north of Miami Beach, in the back seat of an automobile in a compromising position with a young girl. He started laughing to be hell. He slapped his leg and said, come on, let's go see General Lentz. That's all I wanted to know. He was testing me to see if I'd lie to him. I didn't think, I had an idea that's what he wanted was the truth, so I gave it to him. Now, I was briefed at that particular time on the progress of developing an atom bomb to be used by the United States, to be dropped from an airplane. That's why I was there. After getting the rundown on what was going on for quite a few minutes, the people from Los Alamos left. There was this nuclear physicist there by the name of Dr. Norman Ramsey, and Norman could speak in language that I could understand. There was a man there wearing the uniform of a naval captain. His name was Deke Parsons. He had another name, but he was always called Deke, D-E-K. And fine gentleman. He was from Los Alamos, and he was a naval gun expert, and I learned later why he was at Los Alamos. But anyway, with this introduction and with the information that I got at that time, they excused themselves and said they had to get back to Los Alamos. And General Ed said, oh, I got a couple of things to talk to you about. And he said, okay. I said, okay, sir. He said, number one, he said, you know, the only airplane that can carry one of those things is a B-29. And I said, yes, I do. And I understand that. And he said, you've got probably more B-29 experience than anybody else in the country by this time. He said, number two, you had combat experience over in the European theater in North Africa. He said, you set a fine example because you demonstrated that you could do things without being told how to do it and what to do. You began an assignment, and that was it. He said, that's what this is. This is an assignment to tell you to organize and train a unit that will drop these weapons on Germany and Japan simultaneously. That's it. You will organize and train a unit to do this. He said, I have already laid out, selected the B-29 squadron for you to use as a basis to build on. And he said that they're the 393rd Bomb Squadron down at Hastings, Nebraska. And he said, you go look at them, and if you like them, you can have them. If you don't like them, we'll find you another one. I said, yes, sir. He said, there are 3 vacant airfields, or 3 fields about to be vacated in my command out here, and I want you to look at them and pick one of those fields out in which to go and establish this organization. He gave me Ellsworth, South Dakota as one of them. He gave me another one in Kansas, but he said Wichita. He said Wendover, Utah. He said, that's a base there. I want you to look at it. I said, yes, sir, I will. Now, I'd never heard of Wendover. But anyway, after telling me, he said, I would like for you to organize this thing, do it as quickly and as quietly as you can by using normal channels. But if you go outside of normal channels and you have any kind of a problem, he said, use the word silver plate, because that word that's been given to me by Washington is one that you can use and you'll get anything that you want. Yes, sir. That just about ended the conversation, but as I started to get up and go out, he looked at me and he said, Paul. I said, yes, sir. He said, you've got a tremendous amount of responsibility. There's no one that can tell you what to do. I can't tell you, nobody knows what you're going to be doing. You have to do the whole damn thing yourself. He said, you got that. But he said, you got a lot of authority with that word silver plate. And he said, the only thing I can say is, please be careful on how you use both of them, because it's perfectly possible that if you're a hero, well, everything will be fine. But if you're not, if this thing goes boom, you might wind up in prison. That's the way you get a send-off. Now, what he meant by that was, I found out later, that all of the money that was being given to support the Manhattan Project was done underneath the table by Carl Vinson. And he was the guy that in Congress that put money on a tail of other bills that money would get to the Manhattan District. And the Manhattan District was a powerful thing. It was big. And it had 2 uranium plants to refine ore, uranium ore. One of them, the biggest one, was the Hanford Washburn, and the other was down in Tullahoma, Tennessee. They had to be built from scratch, so that's money. Now, quickly, who did all of this stuff quickly? There was a 2-star general by the name of Leslie Groves. He was in the Corps of Engineers. And Leslie Groves had made a name for himself because he built the Pentagon up in Virginia there. He built that Pentagon in under the time and under the budget that Ben had given him to do the job and get it done. Meaning he knew how to organize people and put them to do the work that, should we say, produced the best results. And so he was the man that was given this job called Manhattan District, and then because his office was in Manhattan when he first got the job, and that's how it got to be named Manhattan District. They wound up in Los Alamos, and I'll tell you how they got there. But with that thing, this man, Leslie Groves, had that full responsibility. Now, unknown to a lot of people, there were all kinds of scientists in the United States that had been brought into here. The carpetbaggers, those are the people that worked out over in Europe and the Far East and whatnot. They went in and picked up scientists. They picked up people that had what they needed in the way of brains to do the job that was at hand to build this atomic weapon. But now here you get a bunch of scientists. All of them great men in their own field, in their own countries, some of them here. But here you are, and believe me, you got a bunch of prima donnas when you got that. Each one of them was trying to work and do something his way. They had to unify that operation. So Leslie Groves recommended that Robert Oppenheimer be obtained because he had a reputation throughout the world as being a scientist, and nobody could argue with him. Okay, you get Robert Oppenheimer. He came in there, and he is the one that was able to get these people together. He's the one that got them into Los Alamos because he said we have to have a place for those people to live. They can't just live out on the market. They got to be kept together. They got to be kept in a nice place where they have about everything that they need, and we can watch them, keep an eye on them, what's going on. And that's what it was. Now, it was not a prisoner operation at all, but it was just one of seclusion. They wanted to keep them. These guys that were working on those laboratories and things like that, they didn't need to get out on the town. They didn't want to. They wanted to do their work. And Oppenheimer was able to channel that work in one direction to get those bombs, or to get the atom split, let's word it that way. Now, the atom was split in Chicago, underneath the Chicago University Stadium. And that laboratory was operated by Enrico Fermi, the Italian that was brought out of Italy by these carpetbaggers. Now, all of this took about 3 years to get it done. It didn't happen overnight, but I'm trying to condense it to give you a clue as to what effort went into this thing, and so you can appreciate how well it was done. With this situation of having Los Alamos, it was perfect because Los Alamos had already been programmed and they already had a big field hospital built there. Well, all they had to do is come in and build some houses and build some more things to support the operation. And they put all these scientists up there in Los Alamos. Oppenheimer knew all about that because as a young man, he had had tuberculosis. And Los Alamos was a place in the United States where doctors used to send people with tuberculosis to go to Los Alamos with that dry atmosphere to help them recover from that. Oppenheimer was quite a character. I want to tell you about the first, the first two individuals, odd couple, that's what I was trying to come up with. The first odd couple that I ever heard about was Robert Oppenheim and Leslie Groves. Leslie Groves was rather a rotund man. He loved chocolates and candy. He kept the desk drawers full of those things to eat. He did other things. He was a bully. He really was a bully. I learned that from other people. In other words, he bullied the people under him. Now, Oppenheimer was the son of a wealthy Jewish man in New York City, an importer. And he, at the age of 12, delivered a paper to the New York Astrological Society. I know what that means. That has something to do with the stars. But here he is. He's 12 years old, and he delivers a piece in front of all these people, a scientific treatise, I guess you could call it. That's how kind of a brain he had. He spoke 5 languages fluently. And when he didn't have anything to do learning those languages or something else, he taught himself Sanskrit. Now, Oppenheim was very, I don't know what you call him, energetic type of man. He chain smoked cigarettes, and that's one thing Leslie Groves didn't like. He didn't like anybody smoking cigarettes. He didn't like anybody that couldn't stand still for a couple of minutes while he talked to them. And he couldn't talk to Oppenheimer because they talked different languages. But anyway, I call them the first odd couple. But it took those two people to put the talent and put the facilities together to make it possible for this country to have an atom bomb. Now I'm going to step along rapidly. I got my outfit, I got them into Wendover, Utah, because I went there and I took a look at it. I flew from Colorado Springs to Wendover, and as I came over the mountains there in western Utah, and I saw this garden spot down there. Believe me, Wendover, Utah at that time was a wonderful field. It had been used for training B-17 crews, and it was at presently just finishing up training fighter pilots, P-47 crews. And they had kept that place immaculate. They brought water in there and they had green grass and so forth. It was an ideal place, and I fell in love with that just getting a look at it before I even got on the ground. But if you're going to keep a secret someplace, that place like that's what could do it. Because I learned that when I got down and talked to people, and this man that was there who had been with the P-47s, he was about to leave, and he said, "You're going to like this place." I said, "Yes, I think I will." He said, "I thought it was terrible until they had Bob Hope come here one time, and he looked at it and he said, 'What's the name of this place?' And somebody said, 'Wendover.' He said, 'Hell, they ought to call it Leftover.'" There it was, out on the salt desert, right at the end of the western end of the salt desert. Hard to get to. It had a railroad line that ran from between Salt Lake City and Elko, Nevada. It had a bus line that ran the same route. Of course, there were roads that ran there. But what I'm saying is that it was difficult to get into and out of Wendover, Utah in those particular days. So I thought, oh boy, what a lovely place. And we finally got established there. Security. They sent a man by the name of Ioana, the security guys at Los Alamos. They sent this man Ioana, a major, to be my security officer in Wendover. He wore a uniform. He wore insignia of Army Air Corps at that particular time because they didn't want anybody on the Air Corps to know why anybody with the insignia of Corps of Engineers would be running around. Ioana was really an intelligent man. By academic training, he held a degree in law. and he held a degree as electrical engineering. He was real clever. He was a small man. He had beady eyes. When he talked to you, he looked right straight, right through you when he talked to you. And I liked that guy from day one. He didn't mess around about anything. Well, anyway, to further condense the story, I asked him about his background, where he came. He said, oh, hell, I was at the University of Chicago. Before I came here, I said, what did you do at the University of Chicago? He said, well, Fermi's laboratory had a mole in it. And there was a Russian agent that would meet this mole, and they would exchange notes or money or both. And I said, well, where did all this happen? He said, well, the crazy bastards. He said, they'd meet under the same street light every time that they had a meeting. I said, how'd you find out about the meetings? He said, simple. I tapped all their telephones. I said, oh, he had a partner that worked with him. And I said, well, okay, fine. You had a mole in the laboratory. What happened then? He said, well, my partner and I were listening one night, and we just heard that next night they were going to meet, and we thought this would be just the time to catch them. I said, oh, fine. What'd you do? He said, well, we took our automobile, and we drove in the area there, and we parked maybe 40 yards away, maybe 35. But he said it couldn't have been 50 yards. We parked in the dark. Things turned out, we sat there, neither one of us lit a match to smoke a cigarette or do anything. I said, okay, what happened? He said, sure enough, right on time, the guy came out of the laboratory, walked to this light, and the guy drove up in a car and came there and got out, walked up underneath the light. I said, what'd you do? He said, well, when they reached their hands in their pockets, he said, she exchanged his notes. He said, my buddy and I took our rifles out of the back seat and we killed the bastards. I said, Bud, wasn't that a little risky? He said, Paul, who would think anything about finding two dead stiffs at midnight, stripped, laying in the gutter in Chicago with bullet holes in their heads? I said, you got a point. Then he told me, he said, look, I've got 11 agents in this organization of yours that's going to be coming in here. I said, oh? He said, do you want to know who they are? I said, no, I don't want to know who they are. You tell them to do their job and don't tell me who they are. I don't give a damn who they are. If they satisfy you, he said, that's good. He did that. Next thing was security. When I got the people, real quickly, they had been working pretty hard for about 6 to 7 months. And with that time, they had not been able to get furloughs to go home. I didn't have an airplane for them to fly at that time. So what I did was I suggested to let's get something established quick. And so what do you want to do? I said, let's let them know, these men, that we mean what we say when we say don't talk to anybody. He said, that's great. What do you want to do? I said, I'm going to give each one of them an opportunity to go to their orderly office at whatever the squadron or what they're in, ask for a furlough, and it'll be granted. He said, that's not a bad idea. He said, I'll get my agents to go to Elko, I'll get them in Salt Lake City, I'll have them right here at Wendover, and so forth and so on. I said, that's good. It worked like a charm. These guys got out. Now, they had been briefed thoroughly that it was very tight security that we weren't. I told them, I said, I had the opportunity to talk to all of them. I said, you're not going to be told what we're doing. It's not necessary. You just do what you're told to do. And don't ask your buddy in the next barracks or anything else what he's doing, because he's not supposed to tell you. Just do it. But what we're all doing is we're doing something. If we're successful, we'll shorten this war a little bit. Everybody accepted that. But anyway, they went home on their furloughs. And the agents made their report. About 8 of them got to either the bus station, the railroad station, or the airport at Elko and at Salt Lake City, and they blabbermouthed. Well, by the time they got home, there was a Western Union telegram waiting for them to return to Wendover immediately. And when they got back, I met them. Ioana was a casual observer in my office. And I said, look, at this time you talked to so-and-so, you said this, you said something else. I said, now, I told you not to talk. I said, I don't know what's going to do. You know, it's wartime, like the court-martial, you maybe have you shot. I said, we won't go that far yet, but just go to your barracks. You're under arrest. You're permitted to go from the barracks to the mess hall, and that's the only place on the base you can go. All of it happened that way. I let them sweat for about a week. Of course, the other guys, when they come back from the furloughs, they talk to these guys around here who basically said, Jesus, don't say anything, don't even think it. They're going to know what you're doing. They know what you're thinking or what you're talking about. It worked perfectly because for this 14 months that organization was under my command in one unit, we never had the first security violation, and I never had the first disciplinary problem with anybody. That's how high caliber group that we had. It's called the 509th Composite Group. Why composite? Everything else was a bomb wing, a fighter wing, or this, that, or something else. We couldn't be a wing, we had to be a group. Of course, within the Air Force hierarchy, or nomenclatures, you could have 2 squadrons in a group, you could have 4 squadrons in a group. You could have 2 groups in a wing, or you could have 4 groups in a wing, and that's the way it worked. So, since we had a different organization, I'll tell you real quick what I had. I had 15 B-29s, I had 5 C-54 transports, I had the guts of an Army Ordnance Squadron. We needed tool and die makers and good machinists. I had an Army Military Police Company. Now that's what made us composite and different. I had to carry people and things in the transports that you couldn't put on a railroad train. You couldn't put it with the Air Transport Command because you had to have a bill of lading. We didn't want any bill of ladings. We just wanted our people to fly them and go about their business, and they did just that. We finished our training in great shape. And as soon as we did, I ordered them to go. I sent word into Washington with a code word that I have long forgotten that one word. But I sent that to Washington, and that started the wheels turning for the 509th Composite Group to go to war in the Pacific. With that message being given, the next telephone call I got was from Leslie Grove's office. He had a secretary in there. Honestly, goodness, her name was Mrs. O'Leary. And Mrs. O'Leary said, the general would like to see you the next time you're coming to Washington. And I said, oh, yes, he would. She said, are you coming soon? I said, you asked at the right time because I have to come in there tomorrow. And she said, will you come by and see him when you've done your business? To go to Washington, I always flew at night. I'd take one of those transports and I'd leave Wendover at midnight, or I'd leave Wendover early enough that I could get to Washington and get 3 or 4 hours sleep and do what I had to do. So I got in there and did what I had to do. And I went over to see General Groves. And this man, first off, Mrs. O'Leary called him on the phone. He said, I'm busy now. Tell him to wait. And so I walked in when he told her to send me, and walked in, closed the door behind me, turned around and saluted. I said, sir, Colonel Tibbetts reporting. He said, God damn it, I know your name. He said, come over here and sit down. I said, yes, sir. He said, why did you send that notice to Washington that you're ready to go overseas? I said, General, I'm like a coach that's got a good team. I can't train them anymore. They're ready to go to war. And if I train them, they won't be worth a damn when we get there. So I said, I want him over there where it's to work. And he smiled, got a big smile on his face. He said, Paul, you did something I couldn't do. I said, what's that? He said, well, I couldn't tell the fellas at Los Alamos because the scientists were wondering whether we should use the bomb and all that stuff. He said, I couldn't tell them that I wanted you to go and go early and that sort of thing. He said, but you worked it out for me. You saved me that embarrassment. He said, now you're going overseas. Everybody knows that they have to go too, and that the weapons will be brought out and used at the right proper time. We went along. We made our movement in there. We sent the people that had to go by the ground echelon. They were left Wendover, Utah in April, and by the end of May they were in Tinian. The air echelon they started flying their airplanes over in the first part of June, and by the 3rd of July, the last one was over there. And with that thing going that way, we were ready to go to war. Now, I was assigned to the 313th Bomb Wing, which was a standard unit of 20th Air Force. Everything was just standardized so that you couldn't believe it. Kurt LeMay was running the 20th Air Force at that time. With my arrival there, I got told that some of our crews had been ordered to go up to the wing headquarters and undergo standardization training. I said, "What's that?" He said, "Well, they want to know if the radio operator can run a radio, if the navigator can navigate, if the bombardier can drop a bomb, if the flight engineer knows how to start the engine, and if pilots know how to fly the airplane." That's what they want to know, all of that. And I said, "Well, what's so different?" He said, "Well, we sent them up there, first 2 crews, and he said, they got back yesterday and the general wants to see you this morning." I said, "What?" I thought it was a week. He said, "I don't know, they came back." So I went up there to see this general, nice guy, really. And I walked in and saluted, and he said, "Those men that you picked to come up here to go to that ground school." I said, "What men that I picked?" He said, "Didn't you pick those 2 crews to come up here?" And I said, "No, sir, I didn't pick any crews." And his executive officer came in and said, "General, no, he didn't pick them. All we did was told the director of operations to send 2 crews." "Oh." And then he said, "Are all of your crews like those 2? I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well," he said, "when they got here, they knew more than my instructors knew, so I sent them the hell back to their own group." I said, "Thank you, General." One more thing with the general. He is entitled to know what he had within his command and all that sort of thing. And one day he tried, and this was not a second day or anything, I don't know, it was sometime in July, I think it was around the first part of July. I didn't get out there till the end of June. I waited I wanted to fly an airplane within the vicinity of the shot at Alamogordo when they exploded the test bomb down there. But bad weather postponed it, and I felt that the outfit out in Tinian needed me more than I needed to be there. I had another airplane commander there with me, and I left him to stay there and see what the explosion looked like, what the possibility was, and all that. I did that. I got back to my office and took things easy. The general always had his commanders come up and have lunch with him so that they could talk about what's going to happen tomorrow, what happened yesterday, how could we do it better, and all that sort of thing. It was a planning meeting. It was nice. He had a better mess than anybody, except the 509th. We had the best. We had the 509th. We usually did because the Seabees that built the island had the most nice quarters you've ever seen. They had refrigeration, they had air conditioners, they had everything that anybody could have. And they moved them out, but the 509th moved into there to take those places, so we were fixed. Of course, that didn't increase our popularity any on the island. But I went to his office, asked directed to come up a few minutes early, and when I got there, he was sitting behind his desk. He was 6'2", towered over me, and he sat there and he looked at me. He said, "I went out to look at one of your airplanes this morning." "Yes, sir." He said, "The guard challenged me." I said, "Yes, sir, I think he should." He said, he asked me if I had a certain colored pass. He had to have a green pass. We had 3 passes, a white, a yellow, and a green. You had to have a green pass to get in an airplane. You have a yellow pass to get in the ordnance area. And white wouldn't let you get in everywhere else. He challenged me and he said, I said, "You have a green pass?" He said, "No, I don't need one." He said, I took my AGO card out and threw it at the man's feet. He said, "General, I recognize you and I know you're the group commander." But while he was talking, he lowered his rifle, he cocked it, and he said, "General, one more step and you're dead." He said, "Would he have shot me?" I said, "General, there's no doubt in my mind." He said, "I thought so. That's the reason I came back here and called you." Okay, I think that they're giving you an idea about that. Let me tell you just a moment about Los Alamos and the type of brain that this guy Oppenheimer had. I was concerned about how do you escape the shock wave of that bomb when you drop it. And so I went and told him, I said, now, you know, we usually fly straight ahead. He said, I know, but you can't do it now. I said, no, sure we can. He said, what do I do? He said, well, you got to get tangent to the ever-expanding shock wave. And I said, okay, I understand tangency, but in this case, what is tangency? Without hesitating, he said 159 degrees. That bomb is going to explode and the shock wave will expand, and I could get tangent to it at any point by turning 159 degrees. It turned out he was pretty right. Now, we've had an average time of fall for those big bombs from the time they left the airplane until they detonated above the surface of the Earth, hopefully at 1,500 feet. It was average time was 42 seconds. I have to tell you right quick. No two of those bombs were exactly right. They're the same. There was some difference in the metals that were used. There were some differences, some of the shapes that were done. And this is some of the things that we needed tool and die makers for, and people that were used to working with arc welding and everything else. But we got a set of ballistics before we left Wendover that were reasonably accurate. I say reasonably because I had wanted to put those bombs as I trained these crews that thought they had been through training one time. I told them they were going to have to navigate on a triangular course with 300-mile legs. They were going to have to close the triangle with not more than 1,000 feet. They were going to have to fly and drop bombs within 500 feet from 25,000. The first thing they said, well, you can't do it. And I said, it can be done. I'm going to show you how. Because I had my bombardier navigator, and I had some more guys that had been with me, B-17s over in Europe, and I had some been with me on B-29 tests. And we took them up. We showed them that you could drop a bomb within 1,000 feet. You could close the triangle within 1,000 feet. Well, my navigator, Van Kirk, I took some of them with me in my airplane, and another man took the rest of them. These are squadron bombardiers and navigators, a wing guy. We didn't have to bother with. We didn't have a wingman. But anyway, we showed them that it could be done. Because Farabee and I had dropped 14 of those weapons, different made, different shape. We dropped 14 of them for an average circular area of 334 feet, and that was from 30,000 feet. We bombed from Hiroshima from a 31-700. Now, the secret to that is what I learned to run the tests on the vulnerability of B-29, the fighter attack. I learned that by flying a B-29, didn't have any armament, didn't have anything. If I could get more altitude, no fighter could get up and catch me, because I was flying this stripped down airplane one day because it was the last resort. And first I heard was, tell him slow down. Tell him slow down. My engine's overheated. We can't catch him. And I looked at my altimeter, because I've been fat, dumb, and happy, sitting there enjoying the thing, smoking my pipe and drinking coffee. And these guys could come up there, but I was at 31-7, and that registered in my mind. That was magic. And they couldn't touch me. When I got my airplanes, 15 airplanes on special order, they came to me. They were modified. They were built by Martin Airplane in Omaha, but they were modified to have fuel injector engines. We had Curtis reversible props on them, because B-29 in those days, if they lost an outboard engine, they were gone. That is at gross load. And of course, they didn't fly anything off of the islands out there except way over gross. The airplane was designed to fly at 125,000 pounds, and they were flying them at 155 out there. With all the load they had to carry, the distance they had to go. Well, the airplane wouldn't do it. It had certain limitations with engines and all that. Of course, I had the Rolls Royce of the fleet with mine, and that's what gave me the confidence that I could do what I had to do. We got our instructions from President Truman on the 5th of August in the afternoon. We were ready. We knew we were going to get it about that time. And he said, go. We put the wheels in action, and we took off the following morning in Enola Gay with 2 other airplanes on the wing with blast gauges and recorders. An airplane was ahead of it. They checked the weather at Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and Niigata, because I could go to any one of those from a selected point, in the same length of time. All they had to do was the weather airplanes came in and gave me that report. But anyway, I don't remember anything. I remember the first airplane to answer was Hiroshima's primary, and his radio operator came through with the first message at the exact time. And Hiroshima's clear and visibility unlimited. I'm paying attention to anything else. I just told them on airphone. I had these 2 airplanes accompanying, and I don't know, some kind of cryptic messages. I talked to my guys as we left, went over and rendezvoused and all that sort of thing. I mean, left Tinian and rendezvoused. I said, I let them know that we're going to go to Hiroshima, and they dropped in behind me. Because this idea was that they stay half a mile to a mile behind me all the way up and until they released their stuff, because they would have to release what they did by salvo when the Norden bomb site released our bomb from the bomb bay. It worked perfect. I tell everybody it's probably the most boring ride or trip I ever made anywhere, because nothing went wrong. Everything went just like it was supposed to. Nagasaki had a little bit of trouble that they couldn't take care of, but I think I had already placed the airplane commander, had placed the flight engineer and navigator and bombardier on that airplane. People that I knew what they were doing. Or they didn't work replaced. They were put on that airplane for training with the crew that was going to fly it. And they had their trouble, but they came out of it. Charles Sweeney, an Irishman from Boston, was the thing, and I said he had the luck of the Irish with him that day, because he could have gone and flattened out and dropped in the water if he just stretched it a little bit further. But on the basis, like I think I've bored you long enough with my diatribe, and what I wanted to try to do was to answer questions that might have been created in your mind about that, or maybe even some of the things that happened to B-17s in Europe. Time permitting, I've got a man out here somewhere, I don't know where Gary is, he's usually where I can see him right close, but Gary Newhouse is the man's name. He's been with me for 4 years, and we do this question and answer thing following this video. So I've tried to replace the video by a verbal picture. And now we're going to try to take some, if you turn on the lights a little bit so everybody can see better. We'll get Gary out here and we'll try to take questions from the audience. Now, you fellows up in the high rows back there, out of the firing line, it'll be hard to hear your questions, but I'll turn to Gary loose and he'll repeat the question that he has so that everybody will know what I'm trying to answer.
I know Paul didn't tell you this, but when John invited us to come here for the high school and told us about the program, and I asked General Tibbetts if he was interested in going, he said to me, this will probably be the most important appearance we make in the next couple of years, so let's definitely go. So I just want to let you know that how important it was for Paul to be here.
Thank you.
Tim told me we have about 10 minutes. You answered most of the questions that the other...
You answered them. You've heard the answers.
Let me get to a funny one, a good one.
Now, don't be surprised. He's a Vietnam Marine sergeant, retired.
Yes. Thank you. This is why I asked this question. Could you tell us a story about George Patton?
I don't know what the hell that's got to do with the Marine Corps. But anyway, Gary likes this, and I hope you guys. How many of you NCOs in here? Ex-NCOs or anything? Okay. My first assignment out of the flying school in 1938 was Fort Benning, Georgia. In 1939, a lieutenant colonel by the name of George Patton was assigned to be an instructor in the infantry school, and obviously he was to teach armor. We, as Flight B of the 16th Observation Squadron and support troops for the infantry school, we had to work with the instructors to show how an airplane could be used by the ground forces. And on the basis of that, I was out there this particular day in the Fort Benning territory, where Patton was giving this lecture, and his comment was on part of his lecture was on a new tank. He said, now you advise everybody, this is not a brand new tank. This is just new to Fort Benning. I have no idea what kind of a tank it was, but he said, I wanted you to know that this one is better than the one we had, and it could run 35 miles an hour across this terrain out here. I could knock down trees that are at least 7 inches in diameter. He said I could turn it on a dime. And by the way, when I get through demonstrating that, I'm going to go down here, and he was talking down the slope about 60 yards away was a plantation shack that had been there for somebody that worked on the plantation when it was the Georgia plantation instead of Fort Benning. Nice looking shack. It had a nice tar paper roof. It had rocks border all around it and all that. This sergeant walked up and he pulled George Patton by the sleeve. Patton looked at him and said, Sergeant, he said, can't you see I'm busy with my troops here? He said, let me go. Sergeant shrugged his shoulder and went over, leaned up against the track of the tank, and he stood there. George finished his lecture. He got his flight cap and put it on. He walked over, climbed up, and got in the tank, started the engine, jazzed it up a couple of times. It was a radio. Got it roaring, and he put it in gear and took off. And he did. He mowed down trees. He turned it around. He raised more dust than you can imagine. He got way back. He made a run to that shack, and when he hit it, I'm telling you, dust, debris, lumber, and everything just flew in all directions. But the tank didn't come out on the other side. There was a basement in there, and that's what the sergeant wanted to tell him. Patton at Fort Benning as lieutenant colonel was, I don't think he was a damn bit different than he was when he was out as a four-star general with the troops during the war. He was man enough. He walked right straight up. Everybody ran down there to rescue him, but he didn't need any help. He got out of there by himself. He walked right in, straight up. He took the microphone. He said, gentlemen, if you didn't learn another damn thing today, you should have learned it pays to listen to your sergeants.
Why did you name your plane after your mother?
Well, why did I name the airplane Enola Gay, which was my mother's name? Because my father had fought in World War I. He was an infantry captain. And if there's two things that he hated in his life, one of them was a motorcycle and a sidecar, and the other one was an airplane, because he'd gotten a ride in both that scared him to death. He didn't mind the Germans shooting at him, but he sure hated those two rides. Well, I told him one day, he thought I was going to be, he always told me I was going to be a doctor, and I always said, yes, sir. He was good, he was quite a disciplinarian, and I finally got up nerve enough, and he said, I told him, I had left Cincinnati, I had to go back and take final exams for the second quarter, excuse me. But anyway, I told my mother, she looked at me, she said, you got something on your mind, haven't you? I said, yeah. I said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to go flying. So I'm leaving school. I'm going to go down to San Antonio and learn to fly airplanes. She said, have you told your father? And I said, no. She said, well, he's coming down the walkway here. He'll be in the house here in a minute. Don't you think you ought to tell him? I said, sure. Well, he came in his usual self and sat down. We had it was lunchtime. I was having some lunch there. Finally, I got up on my nerve, and I looked at him, and I said, I'm going to leave school. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to go to flying school, learn to fly airplanes. He looked at me, he said, you're crazy as hell. If you want to do that, go ahead. I don't give a damn if you kill yourself. Mother, excuse me, I left out there Fort Mark. Mom looked there in her calmness and she said, Paul, if you want to fly airplanes, you go ahead, you'll be all right. So far, she's been right.
How many of your original flight crew are still alive?
There's only 3 of us of the original flight crew still alive. Now, everyone died by natural causes, nothing had to do with radiation, whatever.
In light of all the increased violence in American schools today, what message do you have for students?
Well, now look, I've been through this business as a young granddaughter. My wife and I raised one till she was 15, and it took her that long to, should we say, calm down. But I looked at her, and I looked at some of her friends, and some people and other people that I saw. And the thing that bothered me the most was I saw that they had learned the way to solve a problem was through violence. You take a gun and shoot somebody, or you raise hell, or you stick them with a knife, or you beat them over the head. You see it on television every day. My reaction to that is don't believe that. If you want to win an argument, use your head to win it. Don't use violence to do it. These folks are getting tired.
I know. Last question. What do you say to people who have negative comments for you concerning your role in the atomic bombing of Japan in 1945?
Well, I try to be as polite as possible because I was raised to be a gentleman, believe it or not. But I can only take the position that they do not know and understand what a lot of us were confronted with that day. And that is, we were confronted with getting killed. When I first heard about this atomic bomb, I thought, my God, if we could be successful, maybe we could help bring this killing to an end. I never said we'd win the war. I've said to the contrary, we did not win the war. The American public and our allies, the women and men that went into the factories to make stuff for us, the allies that gave us things we didn't have and we needed, a lot of people won that damn war out there. And what we did do was we stopped the killing, and I think that's the only way that it would have gotten stopped. Now, I was briefed about prisoners being in and around Hiroshima, and I've talked to guys that were there, and they said, sure. Well, we had to be told that there was an atom bomb drop. We were down in coal mines. We didn't know anything about it. I'd been asked by General Spots before I took off. He said, we don't know where those men are. Does that bother you? And I said, no, sir, General, it doesn't bother me. I'm going to go to Hiroshima. And that's what I was hell-bent for leather on. I was going to go because if it cost a few lives, friendly lives, it would save thousands of other lives, and that's what I think we did. Thank you. You've been a good audience.
At this time, I would like to introduce Central Alternative High School teacher Tim Ebling.
I believe that one of the reasons why those of us who have the pleasure of attending Central Alternative High School every day do what I consider to be extraordinary things is because, much like those persons to whom we pay tribute tonight, we do them together. And so before we all leave tonight, what I would like to do is call forward to the stage my friends who teach at Central and my friends who are students at Central to please come forward and come up to this stage and stand here in front of these people. So all of you who were able to be here tonight, those students who were involved in this project, and all the staff members who are here in attendance tonight from Central Alternative High School, if you'd please come forward and stand on this stage next to me. On behalf of all of those faces who are looking into yours, we want to tell you that this has been a privilege to pay tribute to a generation of Americans who have made many of the things that we have possible today possible. We thank all of you for coming, and Drew has one final thing he'd like to say before we dismiss for the evening. So thank you again for coming, and Drew Brashaw, if you please come forward.
Just a few things. The student book titled A Tribute to Victory, Dubuque in World War II will be on sale here tonight and is on sale along with General Tibbets' autobiography, The Return of the Enola Gay. You will have the opportunity to have these items autographed after the program. Following that, there will be live jazz music at Duke's Place in Plaza 20 for all who are interested. At this time, I would like to read a quote from a Dubuque area veteran. "The real heroes gave their lives or were disabled, and they cannot do their own talking." Bob Zentner said that. At this time, we would like to present a rifle salute and the playing of taps.